Good to hear. All right, everyone, welcome back. It's another Friday updates, Masari's Crypto and COVID Daily. It's May, and what a shitty April it was. Good riddance, and it is good to be May. I never get tired of the old Justin Timberlake meme. It's going to be May, thank God. Very exciting that we are through what is hopefully the worst, at least the first wave of the coronavirus, and the economic carnage, even though it might just be starting. Hopefully we're starting to see the very, very beginnings of the great reopening of the American and Western economies, because things are bad. Yesterday, big news, we crossed the 30 million unemployed threshold in the US. That is more than the entire working populations of Florida and California. So the coronavirus obviously been wreaking havoc on the global economies. I've never seen quite such a terrifying situation in terms of the difference between the stock market and the underlying realities for the average American worker on the one hand, and I've never seen a more perfect setup for Bitcoin on a global macro stage on the other. So I am equal parts excited and terrified, but I remain a perpetual optimist. That might be surprising for some people. You know, I was thinking about this a lot this week. I've been in the crypto industry for 7 years, not because I'm a Chicken Little waiting for the sky to fall with global governments, and not because I'm rooting for chaos and the world to just burn like some bad Bond villain or the Joker. Instead, I just generally think that there's a better way to build the future, and absent some pretty massive structural changes that are going to be temporarily painful, it's going to be difficult to do that. So I am as excited as ever for Bitcoin, as excited as ever for Ethereum, and I am as excited as ever for the future of work and what that means for virtual events, virtual meetings, virtual everything. My guest today over on crowdcast.io for the interactive session is Kendrick Nguyen from Republic. He's an AngelList OG, and Republic is maybe the leading crypto crowdfunding platform, particularly for raising from customers, individual users. They've been a pioneer in Reg CF, which allows startups to raise $1 million a year in customer financing and kind of retail audience financing. There are rumors that the SEC is currently in the process of extending those limits, because anyone that lives in New York or San Francisco knows if you're a startup raising $1 million a year, not a whole hell of a lot of money. But it is a good complement for teams that are looking to engage their user base and actually get some people to buy in legally according to U.S. securities law. So we're going to talk about the future of work. Today, though, I want to first address top couple of stories. The coronavirus stats have not really changed much. We're still hovering around a 5% case fatality rate, which is a tricky number. The debate rages on as to how many silent cases there are. I strongly encourage people to continue to take this seriously, even when the shutdown lifts. And an argument that I've not really seen a lot of otherwise very intelligent people make, or a nuanced point that I've not really seen many people take, is even if you are young, even if you ultimately get over the coronavirus, you still don't want to get it, because we have no idea what happens to your body, what the long-term impact is on health, whether it's taking years off of people's lives. And right now it seems that the conversation is split very black and white, usually along political lines, between the hardcore, we need to reopen immediately and stop the job losses crowd, and that compare this to the flu, or even a strong strain of the flu, and then kind of everybody else who is in the camp of easing the lockdowns gradually, taking the economic pain for what it's worth, and slowly reopening. But in between, there seems to be quite a bit of common sense and middle ground that's lost in this conversation. Unfortunately, I think that's probably to the benefit of the crypto community and gold bugs everywhere. But there's quite a long ways that we have to go before I will feel comfortable going back out in public, going to conferences, getting on flights, and generally being a usually productive member of society. Live from the Citadel, we're going to get started with Kendrick in just a couple of minutes here. So if you are on the Periscope, go to crowdcast.io/2bitidiot. Other things that have caught my eye in news the last 48 hours. It was a crazy busy news day yesterday in crypto. Maybe the biggest sign that despite the headwinds that we face, crypto is going to be a major driver of growth and a major narrative that mainstream investors are starting to track more closely for the decade ahead. That was highlighted by the $515 million closing of Andreessen Horowitz's crypto fund. A16Z announced this yesterday morning to much fanfare. Their cumulative capital under management just for the crypto funds, remember, is now close to $1 billion. So in addition to being one of the pioneers investing in Coinbase, as maybe at the time it was the largest investment. This is November 2013, $25 million round. They have continued their relentless pace, and institutional investors generally want to take a flyer on A16Z and get mass exposure to this industry. Of note, and this is something that Nathaniel Whitmore over CoinDesk, were distributed at CoinDesk. He features the breakdown through CoinDesk. He pointed out that a notable sentence in the announcement was A16Z interested in funding infrastructure, particularly Bitcoin infrastructure. So for all of those who have criticized crypto VCs and said that they're all about everything but Bitcoin, I think that's probably far from the truth. They certainly seem interested in it from a narrative standpoint and from an infrastructure standpoint. I'd expect more investors to do the same, particularly as the layer one ecosystem gets incredibly crowded and many of the most promising layer one blockchains actually hit mainnet and start distributing their tokens more widely in the next 6 to 12 months. I am also excited about an upcoming event with our friends from Cosmos, Solana, Near Protocol, Polkadot, called Ready Layer One, a play on Ready Player One. That's coming up next week, and we will obviously be tuning in for that and participating in some of their unconference sessions. They also happen to be using the same platform and venue that we are using for the mainnet coming up in early June here. So check that out, ReadyLayer.one, for an invite to their events. It is going to be Layer 1 protocol agnostic, and I think Vitalik is joining on behalf of the Ethereum community. So it really is a fantastic lineup of major players in the Web3 ecosystem and Layer 1 protocol ecosystem. Last bit of news that caught my eye, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it is worth noting that Ripple announced its Q1 XRP sales just yesterday. $1.75 million worth of XRP was sold in Q1. Notably, the last 2 quarters, that's 6 months now, they have suspended their programmatic selling on exchanges. We all knew that programmatic selling was based on manipulated global volumes and was driving a ton of Ripple's revenue. But even the institutional direct sales, the OTC sales, are now down quarter over quarter. They went from 13 million direct institutional to less than 2 million. So something's going on there because the market rallied like crazy over the course of Q1, despite some volatility. And you just don't expect to see a drop off like that unless there are some other underlying issues or something that is not currently obvious to the end consumer. XRP, relatively unchanged on that news, but I am surprised that it's still trading where it is. I will continue to be surprised. I look forward to seeing more real-world adoption of all crypto protocols, but as a crypto asset data provider, we got to call balls and strikes here, and I continue to be baffled and not understand at all what role XRP has in the future of crypto, given the proliferation of dollar peg stablecoins. Makes no sense at all. Certainly doesn't make sense at a $6 billion market cap. Higher if you believe other third-party sources. We tend to look at the free float and our estimate of it, which is much, much lower, but still $6.5 billion for what? Don't know. And clearly that's trickled down to their institutional purchasers. All right, so enough of that. For those of you on Periscope, last chance, crowdcast.io/2bitidiot. Head on over. We're going to get going with Kendrick right now. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time, have a good weekend. Stay safe. Peace. All righty. Kendrick, let me invite you to the stage. And just to remind everyone that this will be available on YouTube for replay as well. Get your questions in for Kendrick Nguyen. All righty. On screen, there he is.
Ryan, how are you doing? Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely, man. Thank you for joining. Where I see your credentials in the background, so this is a home office.
It's not even a home office. I am sheltering in place at my parents' place. I'm not the type who would hang up.
Oh, okay. All right.
These silly
that's
pieces of paper. So I'm terribly embarrassed.
All right. So that's their credentials then, huh? Or just proud parents?
Yeah, and we're in the blockchain world. Like these paper credentials don't mean anything, and they shouldn't, right? It's really about what you build, and I think that's the ethos for the new generation.
Well, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I think you're 2 for 2. Obviously, well credentialed and have had a successful run so far. For those that don't know you, why don't we start out just by kind of going into your quick background, and then we'll talk a little bit about Republic and some of the milestones and new announcements that you guys have coming out and have released so far this year. But first,
thank you so.
Background. Go for it.
Started out as an attorney. I think some of the things hanging in the back are actually admissions to argue in court in the first and the second district. So I was a securities lawyer first and foremost. And back then, I never thought that it would have any relevancy to tech. And then fast forward, became general counsel for AngelList. And as I dove into fintech, it became very clear that like legal and knowing how to navigate that world is like 50% of like financial technologies, right? And then I was there for a couple of years and launched Republic in 2016. And I basically launched the crypto side of Republic in 2017. And that's when the realization that, hey, my legal background is even more relevant to tech than I previously thought, because of this very murky landscape, regulatory landscape that the entire industry has been having to navigate in the past couple of years. But that's kind of like the progression. And ironically enough, somehow those first few years of being a lawyer now becomes more relevant than ever before.
So you started out at, I guess, in crypto terms, spent a bit of time at AngelList before spinning out and starting Republic. Talk a little bit about the Reg CF and Reg A process and kind of evolution of these different standards, because I have a feeling, especially if the SEC loosens up the constraints a bit, that this could be a very important fundraising mechanism for teams if we are in a prolonged recession and you start to see some of the VC activity drying up, particularly at the seed and Series A stage.
If you would entertain me for a second, Ryan, if I may have your permission to walk down memory lane a little bit, going all the way back to the Great Depression, because the global pandemic that we're in, the only prior comparable time was literally the Great Depression. And from out of that Great Depression, the infinite wisdom of the SEC and Congress decided two things. And one of the reasons that caused the Great Depression back in the 1930s was that people were defrauding one another by selling securities. So out of that, Congress was like, hey, unless you're a millionaire, you cannot buy private stock. And in order for a company to sell securities, to everyday folks, they gotta go through the process and be a publicly traded company, IPO. The cost, the burden of that is so heavy that you only have the largest companies, you know, go public. As a result of that, all the way up until 2016, if you're a private company, early stage Google, Facebook, what have you, only millionaires were able to participate early. And so you had this whole ICO back in, obviously, the boom of ICOs in 2015, 2016. Basically, very early stage companies fundraising from everyday people, right? So the body of law that allowed for non-accredited investors to invest privately, it doesn't matter if it's a private stock, if it's a common share, if it's a convertible debt or a security token. Now there was a legal, or there is a legal framework that makes it possible and cheap enough for even the earliest of project to do it, and it's called Regulation CF. Then between Regulation CF and going IPO, there's a middle tier called Reg A. I compare it to like a bicycle, a Honda Civic, and a Ferrari. A bicycle, pretty much anyone can buy and get around, but there's a cap, you know, $1 million for now, soon enough $5 million. Reg A, it takes about at least $200,000 on legal accounting. It takes about, you know, 3 to 6 months at the very least to launch a Reg A campaign, but you can raise up to $50 million and anyone can invest. And then IPO is like $2 to $12 million to go IPO, and then $1 million in maintenance costs going on. So those are basically the three tiers. And we launched in 2016 based on Reg CF, but over time, we now are about to do a Reg A campaign as well. And I think the world got to be split into two rather than CF and A and whatever else. I really think it's just basically two models: how to compliantly get everyday folks to participate a small dollar amount, and the separate bucket is how to get institutional capital, venture funds coming in at large checks. How to navigate that, we of course have a complex solution, but it can be fine-tuned to fit the particular need.
There's currently conversations going on down in Washington, I think, you know, behind closed doors, but this is more or less an open secret because they've written about it, about how to bump up these limits. Are you involved in those, or do you have any idea how this process is playing out and what we might expect in terms of timing? Obviously, you know, the experience with AngelList was one of the core contributors to some of these fundraising additions that were made, you know, 10 years ago. What are you still plugged in and having similar conversations now about raising the limits, or where do things stand?
As one of the most active, if not the most active, crowd investing platforms in the US, we of course have been very involved in providing market perspectives to the SEC and congressional staff. And the limit since 2016 until now, that a company can only raise up to $1 million from non-accredited investor per year, as you mentioned at the outset, is quite limiting. And it doesn't make sense because the parallel of that in the UK can raise up to 12 million. So in the most recent proposed regulatory change that the SEC put out in early March, it does provide for a framework that now, hopefully by the end of the year, the cap for the lowest tier, regulation crowdfunding, the bicycle version that I had just mentioned, is going to be, instead of 1 million, the cap is going to be 5. What does that mean? That means that even just, you know, a guy and a girl founding a new crypto project, fundraising compliantly, they can use Reg CF and raise up to $5 million. And I think that's a much more meaningful threshold to allow for high-tech companies to then build on top and hopefully raise a lot more in the future.
Is there a specific time on that? I know that that's in discussion, but your experience, what do you expect will be the process for how this plays out and ultimately comes live? Because, you know, if ever there were a time for the SEC to move quickly on something like this, you would expect there's not much downside here. when people are losing jobs, when you're already doling out up to $10 million for small businesses, no strings attached, right? Just keep people employed. This is a much easier switch to flip, and hopefully allow good brands that are right in that bubble area to really come to market and have a kickstart that's not just on the taxpayer dole.
There's a process on how a proposed change get implemented, and basically there's something called an open comment period. It's open right now. Anyone can submit in a comment letter to support or to go against the proposed rule, and that period is going to end in June. And we hope that the commentary, the feedback will be very much in favor of lifting this cap, and if so, then by the end of the year, somewhere between hopefully September and November, that this will become fully implemented. What you said, Ryan, I agree completely that improving access to capital got to be first and foremost. But on the other hand, the SEC is also navigating investor protection as well, right? They do want to know that, hey, if we're going to improve this cap, what about people going out there trying to raise and tell, grandmas that get rich now, invest in my company, and then run away with that money? The good thing is that the last 4 years, as far as I know, there hasn't been a single instance of fraud in the industry. So I think that hopefully will go a really long way in just another feather on that cap, advocating for lifting the cap.
That's awesome. And so you guys have been, I think, one of the top platforms, one of the earliest platforms, especially that I've known about, that's been facilitating these processes. What is your, how do you manage the adverse selection problem? Because the one criticism that I think historically many teams would hear is, and this is probably the propaganda machine of the venture capital complex, right? But the one bit of propaganda you hear is you don't want to take retail money at that stage because it's just going to be so much headache, and it's a negative signal for your next round of actual professional fundraising. It's going to show that you don't have smart money in the bank and blah blah blah. The net result is, because it's a different way of raising money, because it's a little bit harder and it's non-traditional than having a VC logo on your landing page, that it's going to lead to adverse selection issues in terms of the available companies for investment. So there's two parts here, right? One, what is your general response to that? I have a pretty good idea for what it's going to be, but make the counter argument. And then we can talk about specifically, the due diligence process that you all do to make sure that that the users of these platforms are not just kind of left with second tier opportunities, but actual high growth opportunities.
That's a great question, and anything that's new, I think there's a general bias within status quo, the ecosystem, that is not as good, or that is for those who couldn't prosper in the traditional fundraising climate. And that's decidedly not true, both factually as well as fundamentally. About 30-40% of companies that have gone to raise on Republic, whether blockchain leveraged or not, have already raised capital from VCs, and they come to us because crowd investing has a very unique value proposition you cannot find anywhere else, which is turning your customers into brand ambassador. It's a marketing tool that even the Airbnbs of the world almost they basically pre-IPO really want to incentivize their customer base with equity, with skin in the game, so that those people would go out and evangelize. And this is one reason why blockchain integrates so well with our industry. Obviously, I believe the blockchain will fundamentally change all aspects of financial services. But whether a digital securities or a utility token, the whole point behind creating a token economy is so that you can incentivize all participants within that ecosystem to act more, and the more they act, the more they earn, and the more they gain, and the more they incentivize. That self-feeding ecosystem is the core of every single token ecosystem that I've seen. Now, that model is what crowd investing means, and the successful ICOs in the past, non-compliant as they might have been, prove the case of the future of project and product financing, not the venture funds coming in and investing first, though our industry is going back to that now, as you, I'm sure, agree, Ryan, that you see many more blockchain projects raising from VC. But the allowing the community, the investor base, to come in and co-invest in the earliest phases so that they too share in that journey and that success, I think is core to blockchain token economies, as well as any companies, quite frankly, across all industries and verticals.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. The second part of this is, even if you don't have, so I'd imagine you're already synced up with many of the largest accelerator programs. Is that are there teams that come in cold to you that you can vet and say, yes, you're eligible to come in here and participate in, on our platform? Or do even you guys use other third-party kind of signals and validations to help with your own diligence process? Because it would be incredibly time intensive and kind of all consuming for a small team like Republic's to basically be underwriting and picking winners when there's a whole cottage industry of accelerators, incubators, pre-seed funds that exists really to kind of help with those early proof points so that you can get to the $1 million round.
Our business model is a really challenging one, Ryan, and thank you for shedding light on the difficulty, the complexity of doing due diligence on so many inbound applications. But you touch on partnership referrals. Republic has been very fortunate in that we're part of not only the AngelList startup ecosystem, but we're the first portfolio company that Binance Labs invested in, and we're very involved with their incubator launch program. So through these partnerships, AngelList, Binance, Algorand, our latest major backer, that we, through them, through their own lens and through their vetting process, accepting companies into their own program by the time they get introduced to us, they obviously would make our due diligence process a lot easier. But over 50% of the projects that we receive, that we handle, are all inbound applications. So to give you an example, in the past 4 years, 3.5, we've received about 15,000 startup applications, and we launched about 150 projects. So the lens is quite I would say it's more selective than Harvard, but that's just a fun thing to say. There are a lot of projects that are credible but are not suitable for crowdfunding just yet. But in short, we do have a complex process. Now our team is a team of over 60 people doing preliminary due diligence and then in-depth due diligence, and then the ones that we can work with, we bring that to our own investment committee internally before they're accepted to launch on Republic.
Where does crypto come in? Because at first glance, you don't really need crypto to facilitate Reg CF. Obviously, you came of age during the genesis of CoinList and kind of Naval's rise in prominence in the crypto sphere. And things went crazy in 2017, obviously, and that kind of coincides with the birth of Republic. But I'm curious. You mentioned Binance. How much of the current focus is on tokens versus traditional businesses, and how do you think about crypto playing a role in both going forward?
If I may answer that question at the industry level first, and then dive in to Republic, I think. The crowd investing framework and blockchain as an industry, as symbiotic, one absolutely needs the other one. Without the crowd investing model and the regulatory framework of what we do, you cannot in the US in the near term for the foreseeable future enable a engineer in college who is amazing, who wants to build on this new protocol, but he is not accredited or she is not accredited. Absent the legal framework that we have, there is no way to involve non-accredited community builders to participate early stage in a blockchain project. That's why blockchain as an industry needs very much the regulatory framework that Republic has. And strangely enough, there are a lot of players with the licenses that we do today. We're the only one in the US that applies our model to the blockchain space since 2018. We also are dependent, or we can, dependent is not the right term. I think that the entire finance, certainly our industry and financial products will be amplified and will grow exponentially faster once more and more of us integrate blockchain technology for two reasons: fractionalization and automation. The fact that I'm going to dive into Republic now because our model, our vision is to be an Amazon for private investing, allowing a single mom from Malaysia or Ecuador to invest $10, $20 into a startup in the US. It's not possible if you go through the traditional banking system. Secondly, to allow, in order to break down financial interest, may it be art, may it be real estate, may it be a share, down to a fractional interest that, you know, a middle class person in an emerging or developing industry or country can afford, you necessarily have to rely on this new technology to make things cheaper and more automated. So the two industries go hand in hand because we aim to be not a blockchain brand nor a crowd investing brand, but Republic aims to be an emerging brand in fintech, in all things private investing. Because of that, I think this technology is as important to us as compliance and regulatory, basically a core pillar that we depend on for us and for the industry to prosper in the future. And I think if you look out far enough, in a few years, it's going to be so integrated into everything that people do in financial services that I don't think you're going to see the separation of blockchain versus other technologies and financial technologies that exists currently today.
Agreed. We have a couple questions. I have a couple more, but we have a couple that have come in here, and I want to answer them kind of in sequence. The first one is from user A. Thank you for joining. Republic's done more than anyone to push Reg CF forward to be closer to its true purpose. And in addition to increasing limits that can be raised, what other changes do you think are needed in the next 12 months? And is that an appropriate time frame to be thinking about Reg CF meaningful changes?
That's a great question. Hopefully that would be lifted from $1 million to $5 million. And I think that's such a meaningful change. The second piece that we have been pushing for, and I think that the current global pandemic and the need of local businesses are also driving and putting that on the radar of the SEC and relevant staffers. And that's how to make the financial reporting obligations a little bit more friendly. To give you an example, in order to do Reg CF right now, a company would need to convert their financials into GAAP, is a accounting standard, and then after that, get it reviewed by a CPA or audited. That clearly is not very pragmatic for a restaurant and nail salon looking to raise, from the customer base to survive. So we have these feedback and propose suggestions coming, giving suggestions to the SEC staff, and hopefully that they will make the current framework a little bit more pragmatic for those who are looking to raise a smaller amount. Or to give you an example, we have also applied that framework to allow people to do airdrops and share drops, meaning they're not raising capital, they're just giving away equity or giving away tokens. If that's the case, why would they need, accounting and financial audit and converted their financials into GAAP. So we have these suggestions coming in, and if one of them happen to get implemented, I think it's gonna really do wonder for our industry and for founders overall.
A second one that I think is related to some of what we touched on, also from a so issuers always looking for new, possibly better methods to raise capital, and certainly Reg D, A, CF, we're all proposals to address some of the shortcomings of kind of current fundraising standards, securities standards in the that are dating back 80 plus years now. But what changes do you think need to be made for U.S. companies in particular, right? Is there something structural where you would expect to see U.S. companies versus international companies leveraging these fundraising standards in crypto in particular, because of the kind of dual issues that having a crypto and token startup and doing a public offering tend to create in the U.S.? I don't know if there's a perfect answer to this, but I think it's a good thread to pull on just to also assess kind of American competitiveness in this converging world that you touched on.
That's a great question and a hard and a complex one. I happen to believe that America as an economy is so large that any new startup or project that has global ambition, mass adoption ambition, can't really ignore it. Unless, and I think that the narrative that, hey, they're just gonna go overseas and launch, there's also another major misconception that I have seen among the founders that have come to us to ask questions and consult us, that they think that, hey, if we launch a foundation overseas and that we don't offer to US investors, that somehow that's all kosher. And if the tokens get leaked into the US market, that's not our problem. And it definitely is a very misguided view of looking at it. And if you're going to do that, know that later on, when your company, when your project grows to a stage that you want it to be, that is, more people know about it, and expansion, the legacy of non-compliance in the earlier phase will come back and bite you so hard, and it may even derail it. So diving into it, which is, I don't think the distinction or that there's a clear advantage of launching a project overseas and ignoring the US market. I don't think that that's the solution for most projects that we have seen. But I think that the current legal framework in the US obviously is very janky, but it's navigatable, that there's still a way to get around it cheaply and efficiently. So I really think that the attention on compliance and on how to do token distribution in a way that fits your budget, and token distribution again can be fundraising or just straight up airdrop, but do it compliantly to leave yourself a path for scaling into a multi-billion-dollar, network value or startup. But I don't think avoiding the US is an issue, and I don't think the current US regulatory framework necessarily will drive innovation outside of the US either, because I don't think that you can avoid our country, our economy.
Amen. I have two more questions for you. So the first is whether you have a view on the recovery, VL something else, because that is going to be a much steeper curve for higher beta companies like startups. Yeah. And that could go either way for a business like yours, because maybe more people are looking for alternative venues to raise capital. But how have you done your business modeling for this year?
Great question about the current global economic environment, and particularly here in the US. It probably is relevant to share that Republic is a lot more than just crowd investing and token fundraising. That's only one side of our platform. We have a private platform that syndicate family offices and institutional capital into deals. So in the past 12 months, we've done over $100 million in fundraising for projects across the retail and the private arm. So we have, by necessity, paid close attention to how the economy will do because it affects our anticipation or expectation of the capital that we can raise for our own projects. So there are three different potential recovery paths: V-shaped, U-shaped, and then the L shape. And V shape, by all indication, probably faster than anyone could have expected, almost irrationally so. You're seeing the stock market recovering very steep. I mean, we're only like 14% off of like the height of the stock market back in January or February, which is pretty incredible. A lot of people are anticipating a impending a drop as well. Even though a U-shaped recovery, I think JP Morgan predicted that in the case of a U-shaped recovery, you're going to get back to pre-pandemic level by the end of 2021, rather than by mid 2021, which is the V shape. And even in the worst case scenario of an L shaped recovery, that you're going to see it into 2022, but it wouldn't be like a 5-year stretch that we had seen with the 2008 Great Recession. And there are a number of reasons for that, that probably is for a different session. But on our side, there's no question that now people have more attention than ever. They're staying at home. And so the opportunity to get the message out, to give them information about private investing, about blockchain technology, about different crypto assets, we've been taking advantage of that and putting our information. And we have seen retail investing activities on Republic stronger than actually ever before. Then in January, then in February, the private investment side drop at least 50%, and I expect that it's going to be 6 months or more. But I think that a lot of founders are going to have a hard time raising from VC and institutional investors in the next 6 to 9 months, and that they really should consider their own customer base as a potential financing source to the extent that they think that they have a value proposition to offer.
Makes sense. I have one last one, and it's a bit of a curveball. But I think it's important because a lot of startups are going through this right now. And this is, why did you take PPP money rather than going to existing investors, particularly given your positioning?
You know, how did you know we took PPP money, Ryan? There's a
I don't.
New
No,
York
this
Times
is
article.
no, this is from this is from user StackD.
Yes, and can you repeat the question again? Can you repeat the question again, Ryan?
Sure. It was why did you take PPP money rather than going to existing investors, particularly given your position as a fundraising platform?
Yeah, we are in the there was a New York Times article that wrote about startup, looking to PPP for additional financing, and they were very kind to reference us in a paragraph. It doesn't paint the full picture. So to give you an example, at the beginning of March, if we were looking at the revenue that we were on the revenue track, then we have runway past 1 year to 2 years. Then in March, in middle of March, everything came to like a screeching halt in terms of investment activities. And March revenue for us was like a 60-70% drop. At that point, not only that investors, our own institutional investors, were not deploying, there was a chorus of pressure on me as the founder and CEO of Republic to lean down the team and lay off. But and a lot of companies have done that, from many, surely in the hundreds, if not thousands by now, have significantly leaned their team. On our side, because we do expect a steep recovery 6 or 9 months out, and that I think think there's a human side behind these business decisions. And during this, pandemic that we're all in together, I've been trying to do my very best to not lay off people. And the only way for us to not be able to do so is buy us a little bit more time. That is 2 or 3 months, and expect that the economy will come back to the level that it was so that we can maintain our team the way that they were before the pandemic. And the PPP program provides, it's meant to do exactly that. 2 or 3 months, maintain your payroll so that things get back to normal, and then you continue on your business. Without a PPP program, I have no doubt that Republic would have needed to lay off, I don't know, 10, 20, 25, 30% of our staff. And I'm glad to say that today we have not let anyone go at Republic, and probably will maintain our payroll the way it is for the foreseeable future.
Excellent. Well, I think it's a question that a lot of people are going to be answering in the coming quarters. We're still very much on the fence about it at Masari, and the approach that candidly we've taken is to complete the application, and we're in parallel to that pursuing all options for many of the same reasons, because our revenue projections, like many others, are cut in half. And my first responsibility, I think, is to the rest of the team, right? As I'm sure you'd probably agree with, and putting ourselves in a position where we're not laying off good people that we want to keep in the middle of the worst job environments of our lifetimes, right? So it's not even about company survival and more about the preservation of the rest of the team. If we can kind of re-up our growth, and there is other investment capital available, I'll gladly repay the very small amounts that it is in the grand scheme of things, if we're able to come out the other side. And I think the most frustrating thing for entrepreneurs is being in this no man's land, where we all know what it means to ensure that a startup is successful and ultimately thrives and gets to break even in profitability. But it's a little bit of a black box for many others that are on the outside looking in. They see, oh, you've got all these logos, just go to your investors, or I thought that you guys were such high growth, fantastic, well positioned companies. And I don't think many people realize that just because entrepreneurs are insanely optimistic and always putting on like not a brave face, it could be legitimate, right? Legitimate optimism, not just kind of pulling the curtain over people's eyes. But it doesn't fucking mean that you're not at risk of running out of money, right? Or more realistically, having to cut ties with very good people and slow your growth, kind of compound the problem, and put yourselves in a position where it's no good. But
100%, Ryan. I think most people don't realize, and particularly people who are not founders or not in the startup ecosystem, think that this is all fun and casual working at WeWork with free beer on Friday, and they don't realize how constantly demanding it is, and your company is always at risk. I compare it, and I think you're a parent, right, Ryan? So you probably can understand this more than I am, from just seeing other people. But I think building a startup is like having a toddler, a newborn baby that doesn't get better, just constantly ill for like 4, 5, 6 years in a row. Meaning at any moment in time, there's always more to do, so that to make the kid feel a little bit better. And it's always at risk of not like making it. So pretty much all resources and avenues that we have to make our path even a little bit safer, not because we're so safe and we're just going to put the money in a bank account and gain interest rate, but really because we're going to be able to extend our runway just for 2 or 3 more months that we might not have. And this is a very honest assessment or honest disclosure. I don't think I've ever said this to anyone. From outside looking in, you think of Republic as like a very robust funding ecosystem. There were points in our past 3 or 4 years, we had like 2 or 3 months of runway, and we managed to find that next extra capital to keep going on. And so that's, that I think is a very common journey for startup founders. So we really are not that different than, nail salon or restaurant owners in our path and our struggle and the work that we do.
Yeah, people don't realize. I think most startups have a near-death experience or two along the way before they
Or
get
two, at least, or two or three, right?
Yeah. Who even knows at this point? But I know for us, it was the Friday before Labor Day, and we had a co-lead locked in. We're literally talking about wiring funds. All that we needed was kind of the final signatures after everything had been fully negotiated. We get this 11th hour bullshit from one of the co-leads saying that they have to pull out. No explanation given, or at least not an adequate one given. So I had to call the other co-lead. And this is someone that I had not known for that long, except for the deal process. So very easily could have blown up the deal. And to his credit, I will always respect and love Jeff, our board member at Uncore Capital, for this. But he basically laughed and he said, some version of this is child's play. And lucky for you, I don't base my investment decisions off of other people's diligence. And we ended up closing, but we were a payroll cycle and a half away from running out of cash. And we didn't lay people off because we knew the funding was there. And absolute worst case, Dan, my co-founder, and I would have bridged us. But it's those are the battle scars that make things like pandemics a little bit easier, because we're already used to these just kind of crazy up and downs.
Exactly.
And as long as we keep our health and family's health and team's health, pretty much everything else is workable.
And Ryan, as Misari is probably the most, this one of the most credible top tier community in the blockchain industry, and you have such a following, you can always raise from your community on Republic CF if and when you ever need it, or just want to include them.
Yeah, look, we've talked about this, and candidly, I've brought this up multiple times with my team. I think there's only two things that hold us back right now. One is the fundraising threshold, right? It's kind of like a waste of time as far as I'm concerned, because you're talking about like a few months of investment capital, right? Yeah. Well, no, not the work. We'll do the work, but it's the ROI. When it's just as easy to go to like a venture investor and just do it in chunks is a hell of a lot different. Truth be told, I'd be perfectly content raising Reg CF rounds annually, kind of until we IPO. That's fine by me.
We're gonna come back to
transparent, you and we already we already kind of do all these things that we're supposed to. But I think the signal element is real.
You're the first person I'm gonna hit up as soon as we hear from the SEC that the cap has been lifted to 5 million. So
all right, yeah, hold me to it. Hold me to it. Kendrick, where can people find you online, and how can people inquire more about Republic if they want to take advantage of your platform?
Definitely. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I'm at ken@republic.co.com. And on LinkedIn, it's just Kendrick Nguyen. And I'm on, I think, Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. So just hit me up. I'm a little bit behind on Telegram and WeChat, just in the past month or so. But I'm gonna try to be more active on there as well.
Awesome. Kendrick Nguyen from Republic, thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll catch you up soon.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure.
All right. For the few brave souls that are left, thank you for tuning in. It is Friday, May 1st. Hopefully we have a better month, and my hair grows back fuller and better than ever. Not going to happen, but that's all right. I'm feeling good. I hope you all are too. We'll be back on Monday with another terrific interview with a leading crypto entrepreneur, just like we are every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This coming Monday, we've got special guest from LGO, Hugo Renadin, who's going to be joining us to talk a little bit more about their exchange and state of the international market. So hope you will tune in for that. We have a killer podcast scheduled for the long form interviews as well coming out. Check it all out. Connor always pops this in the chat. You can also subscribe to our newsletter for daily updates. Otherwise, see you back here on Monday May 4th. Be good, everyone, and have a great weekend. Cheers.